I think we need to hardcore, yeah. That's one word.
But it can be changed from mail to email. But that's where there's a lot of issues come when they do that.
Used to be. Yes.
I'd like to call the March 28, 2002 special board meeting to order. Pursuant to the state emergency executive order 11, in effect until April 15, 2022, suspension of the law allows the attendance of meetings telephonically and other similar devices. So I need a motion for suspension of the rules. Mr. Lightfoot, Mr. Harry Smithers seconds it. Is there, there's no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Becky, do you have a roll call for us?
I do. Reagan,
Here.
Forsythe,
Here.
Lightfoot,
Here.
Sheridan,
Here.
Smithers,
Here.
Denisha,
Here.
Perkins,
Here.
Akers,
Here.
Fay,
Here.
Haggard, here, Yaco, Burke,
Here.
Here, Terminelli, here, Curran, here, 14 present, 1 absent.
Thank you. Now we need a motion to approve the agenda. Mr. Forsythe and Mr. Fay seconds, and any discussion? No discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Presentation of resolutions, Mr. Denisha.
Mr. Chairman, I offer a resolution appointing the Commissioner of Social Services for St. Lawrence County and move for its adoption.
Second by Mr. Lightfoot and Ms. Kern. Any discussion? Go ahead, Mr. Denisha.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to read the resolution. Whereas resolution number 227-2020, appointed the Commissioner of St. Lawrence County Department of Social Services to a 5-year term that will expire August 16, 2025. And whereas the Commissioner resigned from her position on August 23rd, 2021, whereas a search committee was appointed and has interviewed qualified applicants and made its recommendation for the position of Commissioner of Social Services to the Board of Legislators. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Legislators appoints Joseph L. Sieber as the Commissioner of Social Services for St. Lawrence County, effective no later than April 5, 2022, at a salary of $108,348. And be it further resolved that upon a successful 6-month review by the county administrator, there is a potential for a salary increase to band 7, step 5. And be it further resolved that the term of this appointment will be for 5 years, ending on April 4, 2027.
Any further discussion? Mr. Denisha.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It was my privilege to serve as chair of the search committee when we were attempting to find the best qualified applicant to fill the position of Commissioner of Social Services. We interviewed a number of well-qualified candidates. We had well-qualified candidates, but we had one exceptionally qualified candidate. Throughout the process, through the entire interview process, he showed that all the way through. And when we met with the number of employees as part of the interview process, employees from the Department of Social Services, I know that he also duly impressed them, engaged them, and I am very pleased and very proud that he has accepted the offer, and I know he'll do an excellent job for us.
Thank you, Mr. Any other discussion? See no further discussion. All in favor of the appointment?
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? Unanimously carried. Thank you very much. Mr. Seaver is with us here tonight. Not really here, but he's in Florida. And he would you like to say some words, Mr. Seaver?
I just want to say that I'm both humbled and honored to be given the opportunity to serve, and I cannot wait to get up there next week and get started.
Well, we can't wait for you to get here.
I appreciate it.
Mr. Reagan would like to ask you a question.
Mr. Seaver, could you tell a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm a North Country native. I was born in Messina, grew up in Norfolk, went to Norfolk Central School. My college was at SUNY Canton and SUNY Potsdam. I started my career working for the Village of Messina as the executive director of their youth department when they used to have one. My travels, my career took me to Florida. I did come back for a couple years. In 2010, went back to Florida, but I want to end my career where I started it. My family is there, my roots are there, and I feel very strongly about wanting to come home. The opportunity to come home and to give back to the citizens of St. Lawrence County. To me, I can't think of anything better than that. I am so excited to be able to come back.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reagan. Any other questions, Mr. Seaver? Well, welcome here, Mr. Seaver.
Thank you.
All right.
I look forward to
You're
it.
welcome. Yeah, thank you. Okay, there's no CARES appointments, and there means if we have if there's no further business, we need a motion to adjourn. Mr. Forsythe makes a motion, Mr. Kern makes a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Adjourned.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
The microphone wasn't on.
Okay. Ms. Lashaw, are you with us?
Indeed,
There
I
she is.
am. How are you this evening?
We're doing well, thank you.
Great. So this first resolution that I have before you establishes the budget for the New York Scion Initiative. It is the funding for the New York Systems Change and Inclusive Opportunities Network. We have already authorized the execution of the agreement to accept the funding. This would simply put it into our budget so we can move forward with the process. We're currently, we have canvas letters out and they're due back the end of the month.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for Ms. Lashaw? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Our next resolution is modifying the fiscal year or program year 20 budget for the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. Moved by Mr. Forsythe, second by Mr. Fay. Go ahead, Barb.
Thank you. This is additional COVID money that we were awarded in the amount of $16,572. It is available for us to use until September 30th, 2022. It's a tight timeline, but we feel confident that we'll be able to have this expenditure move forward.
Any questions concerning this resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Thank you, Barb. Next up, real property of Mr. Bruce Green. The resolution is real property tax law correction / cancellation of void taxes. Moved by Ms. Curran, second by Mr. Smithers. Go ahead, Mr. Green.
Yes, good evening, everyone. This resolution that's before you tonight has to do with 4 separate tax bills that were New York State DEC owned properties that had bought property over the last 3 or 4 years, and those taxes now need to be canceled on those bills. When property is bought by the state, it should have been put on a separate roll section that exempts this property, and it wasn't done timely. So we've caught that, and now we're asking for these bills to be canceled.
So any questions concerning this resolution for Mr. Green? So Mr. Green, where do we make up this deficit? This is spread out amongst the taxpayers?
Yes, it would be. Yep.
Do you have any idea of the total amount of land and the value of that land that the DEC is no longer paying taxes on here in St. Lawrence County?
I can get that information for you. I don't have it tonight, though, Kevin.
Okay, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Certainly.
All those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried.
Thank you.
Next up, our county attorney, Mr. Stephen Button. The resolution is authorizing the chair to sign an agreement between the New York Environmental Protection and Spill Compensation Fund and the County of St. Lawrence, New York, regarding tax delinquent properties owned by Fleet Techniques Incorporated and Rosalind Samaka. Moved by Mr. Perkins, second by Mr. Denisha. Mr. Button.
Thank you. I won't regale you all with a number of properties that we have worked on, as well as the activities that we regularly undertake, other than to say that the Fleet Techniques property and the Salamanca property will be the 5th and 6th properties we've struck agreements with the DEC and the Oil Spill Fund on for the 2022 year. This is shaping up to really be a very active period for us. Fleet Techniques is located in Norwood, next to the Norwood Diner. The Salamanca property is located in Hammond, actually at one of the main intersections in Hammond. So we're looking forward to continuing to move forward and get these properties cleaned up.
Any questions for Mr. Button? Mr. Smithers.
On the Fleet property, that's quite a significant number for the taxes. Is that correct? 152,000?
That is correct.
Now, in this, it states that the state will cover the cost of the cleanup. How will we recover that amount of taxes that owe?
Unfortunately, Mr. Smithers, that won't be recoverable unless we are able to recoup it through the sale at auction. And let me explain. When I first came into the county attorney's office, one of the things we did immediately was to marshal all of the parcels that were potentially problematic, parcels that had delinquencies that far exceeded our standard 3-year delinquency, but for whatever reason, we had not moved forward. Routinely, in looking at that list, we would determine that the reason why we hadn't moved forward was because the property was believed to be contaminated. Contaminated properties with petroleum-based contamination pose a particular problem to subsequent purchasers. If you acquire a piece of property that is in fact contaminated with petroleum pollutants, you are a contaminator yourself as defined under the navigation law in New York State, meaning that you also become legally liable for the cleanup cost. Now, the cost of many of these cleanups has been fairly exorbitant. Many of our cleanups have been far in excess of $500,000 just for the cleanup on these parcels. So imagine if we took title to all of these gas-related, petroleum-based properties and got into the title, and then were legally responsible for that expense. What the prior activity had been was just to walk away from the property, not continue to move forward on foreclosure. When we hired Gary Bowich, we discovered that there was a way that Gary Bowich could negotiate with the state, with the spill fund, and I could utilize the tax foreclosure process and secure something known as a temporary incidence of ownership, allowing us to go in, do exploration on the property without completing the foreclosure. And then if we discovered some contamination, we could negotiate an agreement with the DEC. Like I said, when I came in, we had a whole host of properties, some that went back to not having paid their taxes since 1995. So you will, on occasion, see some of these pop up as we work our way through the list. And here we are 7 years after I started working as county attorney, and we are still coming across these types of parcels as we work down the list with that type of duration. So I know it's probably not the answer that you want to hear, but the answer very clearly is that it was sat on until we reached a point where we had a solution. Luckily, we have a solution these days, but it's taken us some time to work our way through the list. There were a lot of properties on that list.
Mr. Forsythe.
Steve, what types of funds are available in that account? And how do they replenish it? They lose, they spend $500,000, maybe sell it for 40. How do they replenish it?
Are you talking about the ENRS account? Or are you talking about the money that the New York State Spill Fund recovers?
The money that the spill fund, right?
The comptroller actually has a dedicated account. They receive some of that money through federal funding. They receive some of it through recovery actions. So let me explain what a recovery action is. Let's say that we strike an agreement with the Department of Environmental Conservation, and we strike a deal with the Oil Spill Fund to clean up a parcel. As a part of that signed contract, the state retains the legal authority to go after the true contaminator, the entity that actually perpetrated the petroleum spill into the soil. When they initiate those actions, they can secure judgments against that contaminator, leaving us harmless and allowing subsequent purchasers from the county harmless, but going after the true actor associated with the problem. Because of that, they're able to recover a significant amount of what they expend associated with the cleanup. Now, separately, as I indicated, they receive certain federal funds that are passed through and placed in that state account, specifically earmarked for the cleanups of these types of locations. So that's how they fund it annually. They get a certain amount from the federal government. In fact, all the states get a certain amount from the federal government. And they recover it also from those recovery actions.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Button. Next up, Public Health, Jolene Munger, and the resolution is approving the rates for the coroner's program for funeral homes for transportation services and modifying the 2022 budget for public health. Moved by Mr. Smithers, second by Ms. Curran. Go ahead, Ms. Munger.
Thank you. So we are looking to do a new rate change for the coroner's program for our transportation services. So the current rates have not changed since 2015. And with the challenges that we've had with having an available pathologist within the county, the funeral homes have been traveling a lot more. So we are looking to have two different rates. One would be for the initial for the in-county. So for the removal of a body from the scene to the hospital, and then potentially from one hospital to where the autopsy is taking place within the county, would be the first rate under the initial transfer. So that would be $200, and then the loaded transportation mile would be $250 if they are unloaded. They're going back from the scene. It's the federal current federal mileage rate. If they do have to transfer out of county to either go to Jefferson County or Broome County, then it would be an additional $100 per trip with the same $250 per mile. And then also will give us the option to put out a request for bids to the funeral homes if a funeral home is unable to provide the transportation out of county. And then I guess the bottom part is modifying our budget to increase appropriations for the change in rates.
Any questions for our public health director? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. The next resolution, thank you, Julie. The next legislation, I would defer to Mrs. Haggard. This resolution for Mrs. Haggard, Fiacco, Triminelli, and Kerman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This resolution is proclaiming March 2022 as Women's History Month in St. Lawrence County, and I move for its adoption.
Is there a second? Second by Ms. Curran. Would you like to speak to the resolution?
I would, thank you. There are several women mentioned in this, and I may call on Mr. Reagan, our resident historian, to help me out here. But I took a look at St. Lawrence County in particular. When we talk about women in history, our county is replete with women who contributed not only to the county, but to the nation and the world. Linda Richards was born in West Potsdam in 1841. She became the first trained nurse. She went on to be nationally recognized as a trainer of nurses. We're all aware of Julia Crane and Helen Hosmer's contributions to the rich tradition of music teaching, education, right there in Potsdam. And in Oxbow, Helen Rich was born in a log cabin at the age of 35. She became the first suffragette, and that is mentioned in the resolution. This was in 1862. She also recruited soldiers for the Union Army during the Civil War. She attended St. Lawrence University and went on to become a well-known speaker, writer, poet, and advocate. Her story is fascinating, and I suggest you look it up if you're not familiar with it. Additionally, remember that in 1895, Thomas Clarkson died in a quarry accident. In 1896, his three sisters, Elizabeth, Frederica, Lavinia, and as well as a niece named Annie, founded what is now Clarkson University, but at that time was known as the Thomas S. Clarkson Memorial School of Technology. Recently, Dr. Laura Ettinger and a filmmaker named Zach Miller produced a documentary entitled Trailblazers, the untold stories of 6 women engineers. This featured women who have paved the way for the next generation. The film was to inspire young women to pursue careers in STEM, that being science, technology, engineering, and math. There are countless North Country women, too many to mention, who have contributed to the wonderful life we enjoy today in this most amazing county. Let us honor them all by declaring March Women's History Month in St. Lawrence County. I want to say thank you to the websites of the Potsdam Public Museum, the DeKalb Historians page, and North Country Now for the information I've shared.
Thank you, Mrs. Hager. Anyone else? Mr. Berg.
I'd like to be added as a co-sponsor if I could.
Certainly. Mr. Arquette.
The same, I would like to be added as co-sponsor as well. Thank you.
Mr. Denisha as well. Mr. Reagan as well.
Yes, I just want to thank legislators for bringing this forward. At next Monday's board meeting, I'll offer some amendments of additional outstanding St. Lawrence County women who played an important role in the county's history over the years. This is, I think too often we tend to forget that right here in St. Lawrence County, we have history being made, and history is all around us. You tend to think that history is something that happened somewhere else, when actually St. Lawrence County is filled with the history of our country.
Mr. Lightfoot.
And I would ask Legislator Reagan to include in his comments and when he brings it forward at the next meeting, the Grey Nuns of the Sacred Heart, a group of nuns that really started the healthcare business in the city of Ogdensburg. They started a hospital after they started an orphanage and an old age home, and ended up teaching and running a hospital, two different, I guess, subdivisions of that word. And they certainly added to the structure of the city and the people in it through their good works and their teachers and their devotion to the job that they were doing. So I would hope that he would have a comment about them also. If he doesn't, I will. Thank you.
Okay, Mrs. Hager.
Thank you, Mr. Lightfoot, for bringing that up. I can attest to that. I am a product of the Grey Nuns of the Sacred Heart from St. Mary's School in Potsdam. They're wonderful teachers.
Okay. Anyone else? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Next up is the resolution for myself, and it's adopting proposed local law A for the year 2022 for setting the salary of the county administrator. Second by Mr. Forsyth, Mr. Lightfoot, Mr. Sheridan, Mr. Denisha, Mr. Perkins, Mr. Curran, Mr. Reagan, Mr. Manelli. Okay. Would anyone like to speak to it before I speak to it? Mr. Curran?
I had just done a little bit of computing. When we look around the county and what people get paid to do administrative tasks, $42 an hour is the low average. Bruce, I know, works about 100 hours a week. If you've ever had to call her, she's available. I've talked to her as late as 9 o'clock at night, always on weekends when we need something. And so the first 40 hours of her week cost us $87,000 a year. However, if we had to pay her 60 hours a week in overtime, like we would any normal person that works hourly, her yearly cost would be $283,920 a year. And that's not paying her time and a half that the rest of the, or double time and a half that the rest of the people get for holidays and sometimes special shifts. So I know I had some people question the amount. I think that any hospital or higher organization would steal her from us in a moment for a salary that's closer to the 283 than what we're proposing that we pay her.
Anyone? Mr. Forsyth.
Supporter Bruce and saying, great job for the county. She's always available. I have absolutely no concern with this. It's probably not enough, but we are a poor county on the other hand too, but I support it wholeheartedly and keep up my good work. Thank you.
Anyone else? So how we came about this number is, we looked at counties that had similar sized budgets and county administrators or county executives that had similar responsibilities. And actually Jefferson County comes in very close to the same size budget. Ours is 260 million. And about the same about responsibilities. Actually, I think Mrs. Doyle has additional responsibilities. This puts her right in the ballpark. I think the public should be aware that this responsibility for this job has 26 departments, has over 839 employees, and provides services for 32 counties in the city. And if you compare that to, say, a school district, we know that Parishville is just hiring a new superintendent, brand new. He was the principal, and that starting wage would be $135,000, which is just less than $2,000 than what Mrs. Doyle is actually making right now. If you compare it to the superintendent in Messina, who's making $181,000, and I'm not saying that either one of these people are not earning their money, but the responsibilities for that size of budget and the number of employees and staff in Messina versus the responsibilities of a county administrator the size of St. Lawrence County, there is no comparison. Ruth Doyle could be making twice her salary at a hospital. We are intent on keeping her, and we want her to be competitive. Ruth Doyle loves this county. She works very hard for it, and I think she's well deserving. Recent article today, the article in North Country Now, I have to take umbrage with. It's talking about the 20% pay hike. And it says they're in upstate North Country Now because they are the largest distribution. And one of the sentences says that her leadership has not been without controversy, which is a false statement. The controversy that's being referred to is the negotiations with the city over sales tax. I'm certain that Mrs. Doyle would have less trouble if this board had approved another 10-year extension. This is not her problem. This is our discussion as representing the various towns and municipalities, which we have talked about for several years. Another part of the article refers to the DSS. What people should know, since Ruth Doyle's tenure, we've gone from about 170 children in our care to about 320. So effectively almost doubled our responsibilities. That is not a controversy that Ruth Doyle or this board created. We know we can do better and we're working on it. We've approved over 20 positions. We need to do more. We have an investigation. We're not interested in cover up. This is not a reflection of Mrs. Doyle. And in the article is about responding on time. We all probably have talked to Mrs. Doyle about getting back to the press and responding to emails. If there's a flaw with Mrs. Doyle, that would be under my own personal. I put that on her evaluation every time. But you probably received 150 to 200 emails a day. Excuse me. So I wholeheartedly support this. She's provided great leadership in the 7 years that we've had her as our leader. The second county administrator is a woman. That our taxes have decreased 6 out of those 7 years, and the other year was flat. There's challenges ahead. We're in a great financial position because of our insistence as a board and her leadership. And so I think that this is inadequate. I think it's on the low ball from what I know that what she does, and I will support it. So seeing there's no more discussion, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Next up, Legislator Perkins, if you would offer your resolution, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I offer a resolution opposing New York State Senate Bill S 8415 and Assembly Bill A 9563, imposing an excise tax on the sale of ammunition, and I move this resolution.
Second by Mr. Curran, Mr. Denisha, Mr. Sheridan, Mr. Forsythe, Mr. Reagan, Mr. Bay, Mr. Lightfoot. You're made up to speak to it, Mr. Curran? Okay.
I'd like to be added as a co-sponsor.
Okay. Rebecca, you got all those things?
I do.
Mr. Perkins, would you like to speak to your resolution?
Sure, I would. This is a tax of 2 cents and 5 cents on ammunition on each round. In just the last few years, ammunition has doubled and even more in price. It's just another senseless tax to obstruct our Second Amendment rights. In the fifth whereas, it says the tax is for gun violence research. This has been done over and over again. We know what the research results are. Criminals are criminals. What we need to do is enforce the laws that we already have on the books. It's not guns that commit violence, it's people. If we're going to blame an inanimate object, let's start blaming cars, knives, blunt objects. I mean, I could go on. There's many things. It's people, and that's where the root of the problem is. So, you know, taking this and putting this money towards research is just another way of funneling money to their crimes. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. Anyone else? Mr. Denisha.
I look at this as an attempt to have sportsmen and lawful governors on the anti-gun county.
Mr. Denisha. Mrs. Haggard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've said this before, I'm going to make it very clear. I believe in every amendment of the United States Constitution. They are not without limits, although, but I want to make it really clear. I'm not a gun owner myself. I understand a lot of people are. That is a choice. I would like to say, although, that when I read the resolution, I was not opposed to where the money was going. There continues to be violence, domestic violence involving guns. I am a victim of that type of violence involving guns. We in New York State do not have school shootings. That's because we have good gun laws in New York State, and I support those. And I'm not sure that, you know, I'm sorry that the money comes from somewhere. It may hurt individual people, but I'm not sure that, I'm not really familiar with how much a round of ammunition costs to begin with. It is a tax. Nobody likes taxes, but I did like where it went. I will not support the resolution because I believe the fund should go to something like that. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Sheridan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm opposed to any such tax on hunters, sportsmen, and others. I believe that the move is meant to begin the chipping away process of the Second Amendment, which shall not be infringed. I think it's the start of setting a precedent which interferes with the basic liberties for generations. So I'll be voting for the resolution. As far as research, all they got to do is look at the crime rate in New York City and ask those people why they think that the crime rate is going up, and in all the other cities in this nation. It has to do with the bail law that they've just put in place. And everybody knows how many correctional facilities are closing all throughout the state. I can remember when I was in the corrections department years ago, there were 70,000 inmates. Now it's more like 34,000, somewhere in that area. And they're continuing to cut those numbers drastically. And so, as someone else pointed out tonight, I think it's right. It's not the person, or it's not the gun that kills, it's the person that's holding the gun.
Mr. Lightfoot.
You know, I'd like to have Pat Fahey come up here and tell us how she believes that an additional tax is going to affect gun safety and how they expect that the money generated from that are going to change the research and the Second Amendment rights that people have with respect to firearms, and show me how this is going to work to lead to some further information about gun violence. It's ridiculous to me, the hoops that we in New York have to go through in order to buy a firearm, license a firearm, register a firearm, and now pay a tax on a round of ammunition. The next thing that will be coming is the insurance side of this. These are the things that chip away at our constitutionally given rights. And this is just adding to it. And I do believe, as I said, that the next bright idea to come down the road will be the requirement that all guns must be insured, all gun owners must be insured. And if you know what the cost of insuring your car is, I can imagine what the cost of insuring liability insurance because you have a handgun or perhaps any kind of gun. So, thank you.
Mr. Arcot,
I'd like to be added as a co-sponsor, please.
certainly. Mr. Forsyth,
I'd like to be a co-sponsor, and I've been clear since day one on all these gun rules and regulations. New York State is honest, and you just gotta put your feet in the ground and make a stand, because they'll just keep coming, they keep coming, so. Thanks for bringing it forward, Rick.
Mr. Chairman.
co-sponsor for Mr. Sheridan, Mr. Terminelli.
Thank you, and I'd like to thank Mr. Perkins for bringing this forward. You know, oftentimes I try to stay out of these conversations. But I did look up both the Senate and Assembly bill because I figured there had to be something more to it. And in fact, in reading them, I found that they are just as plain and simple as put forward in the resolution. I think it's super important that we remember that gun violence goes back to mental health, chemical dependency, and generational cyclical violence. It's not responsible gun owners and sportsmen that are responsible oftentimes for these violent acts. So I do appreciate and thank you for bringing forward something that I can definitely get behind and support completely.
Mr. Lightfoot.
Co-sponsor.
Mr. Berger.
I will be supporting this resolution, and I'm glad Rick brought it forward. It's a tax on our sportsmen. It's not a deterrent to criminals. And I think we already pay enough taxes. I don't think we need any more.
Anyone else? Ms. Curran.
I just want to echo what Nicole said. A lot of the violence, especially the domestic violence that happens everywhere, has a root in learned behavior from generations, substance abuse, mental illness. You know, I worked 20 years in the inner city ER, and I think I saw a couple of people shot in domestic violence things, but you know, people were stabbed with knives, screwdrivers, beaten with bats. It's really about the person on the other end of the object and not the object itself. So I'll be supporting this.
Is there anyone else? So I will be supporting this also. I believe this has a constitutional problem. I don't know if Mr. Button is with this about interstate commerce, because this doesn't prevent us from buying ammunition from outside of the state. And then would this law, if this was to become law, Mr. Button, in New York State, would New York be putting a tax directly on the manufacturers or the suppliers of ammunition before it crosses state lines? Could you answer that, please?
It's an interesting question. There's a theory under constitutional law known as the Dorman Commerce Clause. And essentially what the Dorman Commerce Clause suggests is that where a state or an entity engages in activity under legal authority, which essentially its purpose is designed to impede or interfere with the exercise of commerce between the states, it theoretically is suspect and subject to constitutional scrutiny. If you are placing a tax upon ammunition not manufactured within the state of New York, but manufactured in neighboring states or in one of the other 50 states, and it is thereafter brought into the state of New York, the tax's purpose may be designed dormantly to essentially impede the ability of the manufacturer and the distributor to engage in commerce freely between the states. That being said, that would have to be something that a court would have to decide, but there have been other taxes of this type imposed upon activities between states that were later found to have violated the Dorman Commerce Clause. I suspect it would probably be even more suspect given the fact that the tax is being imposed on an activity that is essentially viewed as a fundamental right under the Constitution. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Mr. Button. Any more discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, there's one opposition, Mrs. Haggard. The next resolution, Mr. Arquette, would you like to introduce the resolution, please?
I would. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I offer a resolution modifying the 2022 budget for the County Administrator's Office for the purchase of a dump trailer for the St. Lawrence County Multi-Use Trail System, and I move for its passage.
Is there a second? Second by Ms. Curran. Then Mr. Burke. Go ahead, Mr. Arquette.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Administrator's Office is acting as a pass-through agency for our trail passes. So this will come from monies generated through the trail pass, I believe. If I'm mistaken, I don't know if Dylan's aboard. It could expand further on that.
Okay. Any comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Next up, Vacancy Review Committee, Ruth Dorman.
So for the last consideration this month for vacancy review is a position that we have had a few conversations about, both at the Vacancy Review Committee level, as well as with the Buildings and Grounds staff and with HR. Johnny's with us tonight as well to speak a little bit more in detail to the HR side of things. So this position, in essence, is the second position in charge in the department. This had been the head building maintenance worker position that we've seen a recent retirement in February. So that gave us an opportunity. If you look back into last year in April, our governmental services director, Michael Cunningham, retired. And so we parceled out the responsibilities. If you think of governmental services at the time, it was purchasing and it was buildings and grounds. And we made some adjustments to the assistant administrator, and we moved some of the purchasing responsibilities of the day-to-day to this office. I continue to serve as purchasing agent for the county. And the balance of that is the buildings and grounds side, the buildings and grounds unit. And in fact, having a superintendent, for years, that superintendent reported to the governmental services director. So not having that any longer and identifying that the superintendent's role is really intended to be one of administrative function, to prepare the budget, to have the conversations about staffing, to make recommendations for operations. And probably 3 years ago now, maybe 4, we created the facility management plan. And that also is maintained by the superintendent. And that identifies each of our facilities and the ongoing both preventative and capital maintenance needs associated with that work. And so really shifted some of those responsibilities and looking at that superintendent not having the time to do those functions. And so reviewing the job spec, which we tend to do upon retirement or vacancy, to make sure it accurately captures the functions and expectations of the role. And if you recall, about 4 months ago, we had a conversation about the buildings and grounds supervisor position. And the board authorized me to hire a part-time buildings and grounds supervisor to assist with the projects that we'll soon be undertaking. But that same role seemed to fit the needs associated with the unit in buildings and grounds. And so looking at the job specifications, it fit much better to have the superintendent, the supervisor of buildings and grounds, and then to look at crew leaders. Now, we have a crew leader on the off shift or the evening shift currently. But in talking with Dale, who also has shared with us his future retirement plans in the summer, we identified that not only is there an importance on having supervision on the shift, but also on the work. And so the crew leader conversation will continue to occur, and you'll likely hear more about that in the months to come. But what we'd hoped to do was really reestablish the duties where they belong. So what was happening was the superintendent was getting caught out on jobs and not able to complete some of the functions related to administration and budget. What we'd like to do is shift that back with the superintendent coming in that also can guide the operations of the department in a more constructive way. This supervisor would be what Dale has been doing, which would be out on the job site, going from each one, may not be involved in the project, but can check the status, make sure the resources are there, deploy or bring in additional resources as needed. And then that crew leader would actually be on site, a foreman, if you will, but able to supervise the actual work taking place. So we really were able to reshuffle those duties to where they belong. And I think part of that may have been some confusion, resulting in the position being pulled off of the agendas, but this position's now been vacant since February. And our best intentions of succession planning, I think, have been supported by the board's temporary ability that we could potentially hire someone before Dale retires to come in and start getting trained in the role of the superintendent, but also to get the second person in command to assist in that transition as well. So that really is, I think, an important part of the overall buildings and grounds unit. We met with all the staff last week, and we were able to answer their questions and hopefully allay some of their concerns. And Johnny is with us tonight. She can speak to some of the promotional chains and conversations that we've been having as well. Johnny, you there?
Hi. Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead.
You can hear me?
I can.
Go slowly.
Okay, so with this new structure, we have actually created 3 new lines of promotion in the department. One being custodial worker never had a line of promotion to anything higher, and now it has a line of promotion to a custodial supervisor. We have the next line of promotion we have created is from crew leader to the new supervisor title that we created. And then the supervisor is now in a line of promotion to the superintendent, which we never had those lines of promotion before. So this is all new. And then with this, there was one line of promotion that was affected by the abolishment of the head maintenance worker. But what we've done is replaced that line of promotion up to the crew leader. So in summary, we have 3 new lines of promotion, and the one line of promotion that we affected, we replaced.
Questions?
Mr. Denisha.
Not a question, but a comment. I think, obviously one of the issues that we face is retention of good people. And I think if we don't have a line of progression, it lessens our chance at retention. So I think the line of progression is an important thing, and hopefully it will help retention.
Mr. Reagan.
I would just like to thank Ruth for meeting with the employees to go over with them and answer their questions directly and alleviate a lot of their concerns. And thank you for doing that. I think it helped the employees in the department realize that there were benefits to this. And so thank you for that.
Okay. Any other questions concerning this position? Mr. Perkins?
Thank you. I'd just like to echo Mr. Denisha and Mr. Reagan for the administration looking at this. We'd had numerous calls regarding these positions, and adding these promotional lines was something that was very important to them to be able to continue to move. So I think this is a great job, and thank you all.
So this is a controversy resolved, I would say.
I wouldn't say everyone's thrilled, but I think that there's opportunity.
So we'll move on to the resolutions underneath the county administrator. The first one is authorizing the chair to sign a contract with Fisheries Design Associates for the public safety complex renovation project and modifying the 2022 budget for a capital project in the county administrator's office. Moved by Ms. Curran, second by Mr. Perkins and Mr. Denisha. Mrs. Doyle.
So this resolution allows us to take the next step forward in design and preparation of bid documents for the public safety complex renovation project. We have been working with Beardsley on a conceptual. If you remember last summer, I brought forward the ideas that we were talking about, working through considerations being made for the development and improvement of most of the departments in the building, as well as new locations or return locations for departments that may be displaced. So they've continued working on that. We've just reviewed options for mechanical systems, and this would allow the chair to sign a contract for them to continue with that work, and it provides the funding for that purpose.
Any questions concerning the resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Next up is authorizing the closure of various capital projects for buildings and grounds and modifying the 2021 budget for the county administrator's office to remove appropriate funds for the public safety complex renovation capital project. Moved by Ms. Curran, second by Mr. Sheriff. Mrs. Doyle.
So some of you may recall, when we did the cleanup of both fund balance and the reconciliation of bank accounts in the treasurer's office some years ago, what we took a look at was all those capital projects that were sitting out there that were complete but not closed out. And so we made a conscientious effort to follow the comptroller's guidance, which recommends that capital projects not remain open longer than 5 years. And so in looking at that now, looking over at the buildings and grounds side, we've identified that over the years, we've set aside funds for a variety of projects, elevator upgrades, you see the list here, relining of boilers, renovations, things like that. And when those projects have come in, and I would say all that I'm aware of come in under budget, the reality is then those funds were sitting in the capital project. So the reality was we wanted to take a look at those, clean them up before we bring you a new capital project to consider. So the dollars you see here are those sitting back out in those capital project funds. We'd like to not only empty those accounts back, but also allow the opportunity to set up the capital project for the public safety complex. So this will alleviate a mixture of projects that were sitting in one capital project, and it will allow us to start the process for what will need to occur this year.
Questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Our next resolution is modifying the 2022 budget for the county administrator's office for advertising expenses. Moved by Mr. Smithers, second by Mr. Perkins.
So this resolution comes before you as a result of making the advertisements necessary in our official newspapers related to a number of requirements that the county has. What we indicated when the newspaper designation conversation occurred was that we would see an increase. So we went back and looked at how much we spent based upon the 2 official newspapers that we had at the time. And we looked at the advertising we've done so far this year, and we proportioned that out based on general knowledge of what may occur. That's what you're seeing here in the 4,500. We've not yet spent that, but our expectation is getting that word out, making sure all those papers have our advertisements. This will allow us to accomplish that. And I also included, be it further resolved, that we'll bring you a quarterly update on those, as I know there were some concerns the board held at the beginning of the year, so that you can watch that and we can budget accordingly for 2023.
Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Next resolution is authorizing the chair to sign maintenance and software agreements for folding/inserting systems in the central printing and mail and modifying the 2022 budget for the county administrator's office. Moved by Mr. Sheridan, second by Mr. Perkins.
So this recognizes a replacement piece of equipment that we discussed at budget time and set aside in capital reserve. We looked at situations where these types of things may or may not occur depending on their usable life. And so we wanted to set funds aside for this year, actually expecting that we were going to need it last year, but making it through. You can see the data associated with the use of this piece of equipment. And this actually came in, I believe we set aside $40,000 for this. So it came in just a little bit under that. And if you would like details about, besides the name of the piece of equipment, Dylan can speak to that.
Well said.
Just in case.
Okay. So 111,631 pieces of mail with an additional 32,000 plus pieces. That's a lot of folding.
Yes.
Any questions for Mrs. Doyle concerning this resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next resolution is modifying the 2021 budget for the county administrator's office for costs associated with the court-ordered treatment services at New York State operated inpatient mental hygiene facilities. Moved by Ms. Curran, second by Mr. Smithers and Mr. Sheridan. Mrs. Doyle.
So I had not planned, as a result of information based upon how many folks we were taking care of, on having to bring forward an additional resolution. However, upon receipt of our final bill, over $300,000, I come to you once again. This should close out 2021. We're looking at a difference in 2020 of $734,000 to an increase of $1.4 million in 2021. So this is, as you've adopted, a portion of your legislative agenda to ask for recognition of this change from a regulatory standpoint, but also potentially for some reform associated with how these costs are paid. So this resolution will help us wrap up 2021.
Mr. Borchett.
2020 was it 50-50?
In the first quarter, so really the last quarter of 19.
Okay.
But we saw anywhere,
50-50.
yeah, and we saw anywhere between 3 to 4 people. Now we're up around 6.
Mr. Smithers.
I think it's worth pointing out again, this is another example of state shifting costs to the county.
Else. It's equivalent to about a 4% tax on the local share. So this is a surprise, and it keeps growing. So any other discussion concerning the resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Our next resolution is authorizing the chair to sign a contract with Colin Mackey for assistance and additional training in the Department of Social Services. Moved by Mr. Perkins, second by Ms. Curran. Mrs. Doyle.
This resolution comes before you. We are in the interview phase for the accounting supervisor. You'll recall that we had a fiscal manager when Mr. Mackey held the position. We have since that time increased the grade and also moved this position back underneath the union title. So this position now is being interviewed for. Our hope is that we'll have someone very shortly. Mr. Mackey's agreed to continue with us. I was fortunate to meet his new supervisor in Madison County and thanked him for sharing. But certainly he appreciated that. He said Colin's bringing some insight to their processes as well. So I have indicated how much we've spent so far so that you can recognize it's been a modest amount to finish the claim for 2021, which is what he's been doing with us. He's agreed and certainly recognizes the importance of having some time to train the new person. So this would continue to allow that relationship through April 15th at the most. Or May 15th, I'm sorry.
Okay. Any questions concerning the resolution? Mr. Reggie.
Why are we moving it into from a fiscal manager to an accounting supervisor?
So this, a couple of reasons. So when we look at the supervisors across the department, all of the supervisors below the director of services are included in the union. And this position allowed for the grading associated with the duties and responsibilities to be increased in compensation.
Any other questions concerning this resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Our next resolution is authorizing the chair to sign a contract with Adirondack Architectural Heritage for the preparation of a National Register of Historic Places District nomination application. Moved by, second by Forsythe.
So this resolution follows up on a couple of conversations we had in the late summer, early fall of 2021. Both the Buildings and Grounds Committee recommended and the board supported conceptually seeking district designation on the National Register for this courthouse facility, the corner surrogates building, as well as the old jail facility. So in looking at that and acknowledging the fact that none of us have the expertise to put an application together, we utilized a competitive process and have come up with the group Adirondack Architectural Heritage, and we're moving some funds to make that payment available. Our expectation with the current timeline would be that September, because these are pretty intricate and detailed, that a September application would be the goal.
Okay, any questions for Mrs. Doyle? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The next resolution is authorizing the chair to sign a contract with Allied Health World Insurance for medical malpractice insurance coverage for county employed medical providers. Moved by Ms. Curran, second by Mr. Perkins and Mr. Forsythe. Mrs. Doyle.
So this resolution comes to you when we brought forward the one last year, it didn't allow for a term that exceeded 2021. We've also made a change in terms of how this is being appropriated and separated this off from the liability and casualty fund into the departments that it impacts. The cost we've seen go up from, I believe it was 129 up to 179. And so we're portioning that out to the departments that it is impacting. You have the account orgs and the object codes included, where those accounts are being paid from. This really was a move to understand and provide support for the malpractice insurance, so the liability fund didn't have to carry that any longer.
Any questions for Ruth Doyle? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Next up, we have a SWOT analysis of our satellite office pilot for social services in Ogdensburg.
So I appreciate the opportunity to provide you with this update. When the board supported a concept, a small concept about how we might improve things, we weren't sure how it would go. And quite frankly, I kept in every conversation I had indicating that it could be a complete catastrophe, or one of those things like many things in COVID taught us, why hadn't we always been looking at doing things like this? So this ends up being a mixed blessing, and I'll explain. So in doing the SWOT analysis, we talked about, after 6 months, bringing you a report and an update on how things have gone and what my recommendation would be going forward. In doing that, we flip to the next one. We identified the issues that we were trying to address. And so in front of you, you see, I believe everyone can see online, correct, Dylan?
Yes.
Okay. We wanted to address the stigma of social services, specifically CPS, also understand the space situation in the HB Smith building for caseworkers and other employees. We wanted to address the response time for our referrals, also look at a couple of the intangibles, the better integration with the school districts, work environment for our staff, as well as an embedded and improved partnership with the community. So those were some of our early thoughts about how we might improve what we do here in Canton. So when you're looking at a SWOT analysis, I lined up just the items that we try to address. Next slide. You set your objectives, you evaluate your environment, you appraise internally what you believe to be the impacts, analyze the strategies that you're using, identify your critical success factors, understand your strategic implementation strategies, and monitor and amend accordingly. So what I wanted to do was talk to you about how we got there, what our determinations were, and what's happened since. So some of the questions we were asking is who should go? We know that there's been additional scrutiny on children's services, so we weren't sure that it made sense to send and divide a department during this time. When should the move take place? How much would it cost? What services should we make sure are available? And those have all evolved as we've gotten into this. And where should we be? So we looked immediately at how the cases break down. and quickly identified that either Ogdensburg or Messina would be our best location for a satellite to begin with. We identified staff for the space that we were considering and identified that approximately 2 units would make the most sense. We ended up actually expanding upon that just slightly. So we included child protective services, home finding, and a preventive unit as well. So the integration into the community is a key for the success of this venture, this pilot, however you want to refer to it. Identifying that we could quickly address issues in Ogdensburg and the surrounding area by being 20 miles closer and not having to leave from Canton. Also be able to show up for those referrals in a shorter time frame. So we asked staff, would they give it a try? Would any staff be interested? And at the beginning, it wasn't an easy sell. It was something we hadn't done before. It was something people weren't sure about, and we hadn't chosen our location, so they didn't know what they'd be walking into. So we were able to tour a few different spaces in Ogdensburg, as well as consider the geography when assigning staff. And we agreed that we would assess the impact 6 months on, and here we are. We occupied in October, and here we are at the end of March. So talking about, and many of you have visited the department and identified the spatial challenges with existing staff. Also acknowledging in the largest county in the state, how we might provide services in a better way by not all leaving from Canton. Also understanding, and we had conversation just before this meeting about the increase in need across the county in children's services on all levels, whether it be child protective because there's been a report, or whether it be FAR because there's voluntary services being provided, or in an ongoing foster care situation where we need to have those visits and we need to coordinate care for the children we take care of. That also required our fleet and the needs to grow and have vehicles available in Ogdensburg for staff who make home visits. Included coming out of COVID also was the professional development for the staff that are there. Typically, it's all provided in the building here, or prior to COVID, you would travel to Albany, but it all was concentrated here along with our staff. So those were areas that we wanted to make sure, one, that we could attract new staff, but also to retain our existing staff. As the process began, we identified United Helpers' location as the space that we would occupy, and the board authorized the necessary lease so that we could move there. One of my directives to staff was to make sure that resources were deployed, whether it be phones, computers, cars, whatever it took, so that that wasn't the reason we weren't successful. And so in doing so, needs kept popping up week after week, month after month. How do we get the mail over there? How do we, all of the things you think about in the general operations of a business. And so working to have staff really stepped up. Some staff were stopping in here on their way to Ogdensburg. They'd pick up the mail and take it with them, or they'd pick up a car because there was an extra need. People really embraced this idea. And we had 15 staff agree to move to Ogdensburg. And this also meant they had to take all of their files, everything they would need to do the work we asked them to do from a new location. And there were certainly concerns, and change is difficult. So our goals, though, were we're going to do a survey of staff. I wanted to make sure that they had on-site supervision. So that ended up being a rotation of staff who mostly report to Canton, but will each take turn taking days in Ogdensburg, as well as having on-site supervision assigned there. I think they're both critical components because your supervisors need someone to go to, as well as the folks in the office, even though they may be experienced, to be able to have a supervisor present for a variety of reasons. Either some unattended guests visit your location, or you need to conduct a meeting or advise on a case. Variety of reasons, having that supervision on site was key, but also having the availability of their supervisor, the grade A or the director of services present was critical to identify any of the needs and make sure they were met. Ensuring that productivity continued or improved was another area that we wanted to make sure was addressed in a timely fashion. One of the things that we continue to hear about the third floor in a variety of areas in the H.B. Smith building was that every conversation can be heard. Sometimes it's very difficult to focus when there's so many people around and there's so much going on. Now that cuts both ways, because in being there, you understand more that's going on. You have better knowledge about your case, and arguably you may have better contribution because you have all that information. But what staff were reporting that it was very difficult because they couldn't focus on what their responsibilities were in some situations. And that is probably one of the biggest areas we've seen improve in morale, in ability to focus, and in productivity. We certainly always focus on reductions in absenteeism. Sometimes if people, I think the last 2 years taught us anything, it's that even getting to work some days is very difficult. So giving them a place that they were hoping to go to, looking forward to go to, even though they had very difficult work to do, made all the difference in the world. And you'll hear a little bit more about that later. So again, I mentioned that equipment and technology, we deployed a copier from the location here. We were able to get set up. We had some glitches associated with being able to fax from there and do a couple of those performance functions during the day. But for the most part, we were able to resolve those. So in doing so, I just have attached some of the costs here that you're looking at. We rented the space. We're about halfway into that now at 6 months, about $12,000 we've spent. So the resources, that's an evolving number. We've just replaced all of our copiers. We addressed an issue with security. And so we were able to provide security on very short notice with an existing partner. Because staff have that comfort here, we wanted to make sure that wasn't an impediment to doing their job in Ogdensburg. Again, having that on-site supervision was critical. We also recognized the file management and shredding component was something that we needed to address, because otherwise they would be carrying all those files back to Canton in order to be shredded. So we arranged to have, for a nominal fee, to have the shredding done on site, much like we do here in Canton. Also identified some areas of interest in the future, potentially in these locations, be able to provide visitation. So some of the barriers getting to Canton to have visitation may be conquered by having that closer to where you live. Also being able to do some of the routine functions like drug testing on site may also prevent folks from having to come all the way to Canton. An inconvenient, but maybe necessarily required service attached to any of the orders that are in place. But also identifying where your critical success, how are we going to know if it's working well? And so we surveyed the staff, and in doing so, we're able to understand the reduction in response time. And so that means they can get to their services, whether it's at the hospital, the mental health unit is there, whether it's the psych center or the services they provide, they're able to cut out that extra half hour traveling from Canton. To increase those visits with clients, because it's located in Ogdensburg Central to that side of the county. Also looking at the retention of staff. We've seen a reduction in what we've considered to be the increase in departing staff in Ogdensburg. I think it's safe to say we've lost no one. So that also, I think, is something to be aware of. Now, that could just be the units we happen to transfer. That could just be related to a number of variables. So I hesitate to hold that out as the reason Ogdensburg worked. We've improved the work environment. We've added trained and experienced staff in the satellite office. And also with a goal looking forward, if the board is supportive, of increasing access and programs to school districts. So that brings you to my recommendation. But first, I just wanted to mention some of our survey results. 60% of the folks who have moved to Ogdensburg have a shorter commute. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily that the 10% who've increased their 21 to 30 miles are thrilled about that increase. But those are areas I think over time, perhaps you may not want to work in that unit. You may want to transfer to a unit that's based out of Canton. In looking at some of the most challenging pieces of this transition, the areas that have not been challenging were security in the office, the files and access, the available conference space, the access to colleagues, and access to visits from the public. A little bit more challenging, like I said, with the equipment and technology, but we're working through that. Very important areas that were identified by staff are the office environment, the change in commute. Fewer than you would expect identified that the availability of a gym was not important to them. The improved response time to referrals was also somewhat important in our, not important, somewhat important, and very important survey. The number of folks that have used the gym attached to the office, and I may have neglected to mention that, there is a gym that's accessible just outside the suite in Ogdensburg, is 60% have not used it, 40% have. And those who have used it have identified that about 3 use it 50% of the time, 7 use it once a week, or 8 use it once a week. So there is an opportunity there for folks to have that outlet. And the folks at United Helpers let us know that they have staff who use it at their discretion. They're getting their work done. They're allowed to use the equipment there when it fits into their schedule. And this to me was the tell and the basis and portion of my recommendation. 90% of the people in the survey, and we surveyed the people who work in Ogdensburg, would prefer to continue to work at the location. And the benefit for us, for staff, for the county, having a staff in Ogdensburg was 100%. So in some of the comments that we received in response, a productive and calm and pleasant environment. There are walking trails near our building. The office space is beautiful and comfortable and flows well. I find myself happy to come to work now. Home visits across the county, I think also is a part of my second recommendation, but making those home visits, some who are now in Ogdensburg find that there is a greater distance to their commute. The new office space has been wonderful, creating closer relationships with coworkers. My overall health and mental health has improved. 1 or 2 more units should be afforded the opportunity to work in Ogdensburg. Are just some of the comments. Work morale and effectiveness has changed since coming to the Ogdensburg office. So I'm happy to share the survey results with the group and certainly tracking, and will provide you with a budget modification if the board is supportive. But my recommendations would be as follows. In the immediate timeframe, retain a presence in Ogdensburg on a permanent basis. Also grow so that we occupy the full suite. One of the areas that was raised as a concern was we share space with United Helpers staff and their sense of the confidentiality. We have all the necessary agreements in place, but that would give the entire suite the county presence. And then in the future, pursue a greater presence in the school districts, as well as create a second satellite office in Messina. Questions?
Just want to clarify for those who aren't familiar, when we say United Helpers, this is the downtown in the mall area that
It
we're
is.
talking about.
I apologize. Yes, the Mosaic building, I think it's known.
And that has access to the city's trail system. It's just within sight of the St. Lawrence River. It is, right over the hill to the Oswegatchie River. It's a beautiful area, and it's good to see the county moving back to Ogdensburg from where we moved from.
And in that location, I apologize, thank you for the clarification. Being able to walk for lunch to their local restaurants, things of that nature was also noted as an area that they really appreciated.
Mrs. Hager has a question or comment.
A comment. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ruth, I love this creative solution that you've come up with, and I'm glad it's working out for our employees. Any one of us who have gone to the Smith building know that it's crowded. It's neat. It needs something. I'm just going to say that. And this is a great way, not only to provide for our employees, but the communities in general. I love what you've done. And I just want to put a plug in for, we have office space in Potsdam too.
Good to know. Good to know. And to that end, I would just also mention that, if we're able to, in moving additional folks into Ogdensburg and potentially have support to move into Messina, that may free up enough space so that we can really get some work done in the building here in Canton as well.
Mr. Terminelli has a question or comment.
Just a quick comment. I want to thank you for taking the initiative to research this and the willingness of the staff to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. I
Yes.
guess, to branch out.
They've been great.
And in monitoring it very closely in the progress, getting survey results directly from the staff to know how it's impacting them, but also the people in the county that are relying on these services. We provide much needed services, and we have to keep in mind, again, our county is the largest county. We can't always ask people to come to us. Sometimes we need to be willing to go to them. So if it's retaining staff and if it's getting access to critical services and it's keeping that connectivity to the community impact, I fully support the move to look at the areas where we may be able to do this. In that, I do have a question. Have we considered any of the having any of the eligibility services being offered in those satellite offices?
Can I answer that?
Yeah.
We have, and what we're thinking about doing if we're to make it a permanent setup would be during application acceptance, perhaps have someone over there that could work directly with folks coming in. And we talked about doing that, in this period of time. I think it being heat season made it a little more difficult to start up something new like that. But also I think on the eligibility side, application assistance, things of that nature. We talked about a flex space so that depending on the program, we could make services available for folks that could be over there. And even if they were there a day a week or 2 days a week, we could advertise it that way so that folks would know where to go.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Smithers, in your remarks, you took umbrage to one of the comments about our county administrator. And this is an example of how that comment is valid, that criticism was not valid of our county administrator. And it's nice to hear some positive things about social services and steps that you've taken in that direction. And I look forward to continued improvement in it. So, yes, thanks for your work in that area.
Absolutely.
Ready?
Yeah, and just, I think it's terrific that we're, putting employees into the downtown, who, will be able to, eat at the local restaurants and, help, support the local, businesses. And, I think it's a real credit to the administration that they're, willing to try something new. And, it's important to experiment. A lot of people don't realize all the different things that county government does. And, here we are, we're moving 8 positions in the highway department to the outskirts of Ogdensburg at the new highway outpost. We've already got, 8 to 10 people in addiction treatment and chemical dependency in Ogdensburg. This is another 20 county employees, who are providing extremely important services to the families of Ogdensburg, but also providing an economic boost to the community because, these are great jobs and with great benefits. And, we're reducing our mileage costs for those employees and our own transportation costs. And I think it's, those kinds of innovations that are helping us to hold the line on taxes while making our services more efficient. And anytime that you can make a major change like this and get 90% of your employees who are happy, that's a real testament to our county administrative staff and to everybody on the board who supported a new thing. And so I just appreciate what's being done and appreciate the efforts of the staff who did this at a difficult time, at an uncomfortable time for many of them. And I'm happy to see that the employees appreciate it and are, seeing a benefit to their morale. And God knows they deserve a pat on the back for all that they've been through over the past 2 years. So thank you.
Okay, anyone else?
And I would also mention, United Helpers has been a good partner in this. We certainly could not have done this if the staff weren't willing to try, as many of you have said, to do this very unusual and new thing. I think that, over the years, governments go through contraction and expansion, and we are taking what we have, and if you recall, approving the highway outpost, recognizing it's probably something we've needed to do for a number of years, is to move into the communities and be more accessible and have resources there quicker. Similarly here, it's our human resource capital now that we're making available to folks where they're at. And they're serving Ogdensburg and that greater river area, coming all the way down into Hammond and back towards Waddington. So I think if we're able to, and the board is supportive of us looking into Messina, we'll begin that process immediately. But also we would have a conversation with United Helpers about the balance of that location. So certainly a positive for the staff over there.
Mr. Lightfoot.
I'd just like to point out too, that we also have staff from the probation department over there. We have staff from the treasurer's office over
Yes, we
there.
do.
And we have a DMV office over there. So we have quite a footprint in Ogdensburg, New York.
Mr. Bay.
I just like to agree with everything you already said. He's already said that some employee from the county said to me something that summarizes what everybody's already said. When we were packed in the Smith building, if somebody was having a bad day, everybody was. It summarizes the split of
Improvement.
taken away. Thank you. Very good said.
Super, thank you for your leadership on this. It's a great alternative. It's plus news for the city of Ogdensburg and for DSS.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it. Anything else for Ruth Doyle at this time? We'll move on to committee reports. First up, Coordinator Cooperative Extension, Mr. Diddy.
Mr. Chairman, we last met Tuesday, March 22nd at the Cooperative Extension Farm, set the meeting schedule for 2022. Did a little bit of a different schedule. Historically, we've always met on Tuesday every other month, but there were conflicts, so Patrick was able to get it arranged, so we were as well. There was some open, we had a couple open positions at the Cornell Cooperative Extension. One is Ag and Food System Program Manager and Food Systems Program Assistant. We spoke a little bit about the regional ag team and the contributions that are made by St. Lawrence County versus some of the other counties and what we're getting for our, that's still is not that resolved yet. Next meeting is Wednesday, May 25. And 2021 was all things considered, was a good year.
Thank you, Mr. Nation. Fish and Wildlife Management Board for Region 6, Ms. Curran.
Thank you. So we talked about the black bear harvest for 2021. It was 30% lower than the 2020 harvest in the northern zone of Region 6. It was about 20% lower than the 2020 harvest for the southern zone of Region 6. They had a 24.2 bears per 100 square miles, which was the highest density in the state, our region, or our part of the state. We had 5 of the 25 heaviest bears in the whole state, which means we're feeding our bears as well. They have an ongoing fisher telemetry project. They capture the fishers and tag them so that we can follow them around and figure out how many little kits they're having and such, and their survival rate. We're also capturing and tagging the eastern mallard and black duck. We try to figure out what it is that's going on with their population, because that's down overall. And there is an upcoming hunter safety course, which I sent all of you today in the email, and they had handout on some of the projects that they have going on for our region. So I sent that to you as well. And the newest change that we had is they're increasing the length of how long fish need to be in order to make them legal and for us to catch them.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Curran. Next up is our Fisheries Advisory Board, Mr. Manelli.
So unfortunately, due to attendance or lack of attendance, they canceled the March 22nd meeting. Our next meeting will be on May 24th.
Thank you. Governor Fair Board, Mr. Smithers.
Yes, as I mentioned before, Sawyer Brown is booked for a Tuesday night opening. Tickets are will be $50 reserved seat, $30 general admission because for that concert. Wednesday will be band night as usual. Saturday night tractor pull, $15 for that. They're also talking about having tribute band on Saturday night and a local band. And there's a need for someone to oversee and manage the storage next winter due to a resignation of longtime manager John Scooter Wetmore in that position.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smithers. You're up again for Highway and Solid Waste Committee.
Okay, some of you may have seen the email from Don Chambers that pave our potholes funds will be directed to New York City. If enacted, St. Lawrence County will lose $836,000. County Highway Association is going to request an increase in CHIPS money to compensate for the loss. I'm not sure how the outpost buildings are going. I haven't heard much about that since our last report, so I'll leave that to the county administrator to fill us in on that area.
Well, if there's one thing that we all drive on is the potholes in this winter's roads. They're wicked.
No, the winter roads are great.
The roads, where the ice is down. It's
Right,
the second state highway 37
Yeah.
from Waddington to Ogdensburg has got some rim bangers. Really bad. Move on to the Industrial Development Agency with Mr. Reagan.
There's no report, they haven't met yet, we'll be meeting later this month.
Okay, thank you. Recreational Trails Advisory Board, Mr. Arquette.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Recreational Trails Advisory Board met last Tuesday, put in the request for the dump trailer. There's conversation about the trail pass, and Dylan and his staff are working towards getting the trail pass up and out to our vendors. And then shortly following that, they'll be available online. The Legislative Trails Committee met this past Friday with the DEC in the chambers. I thought the meeting went very well. We spoke about our previous resolution about the 8,000 acres in the middle of our state and the possibility of us accessing that, and other issues in and around the multi-use trail. But I thought it was a productive meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arquette. Next up is Mr. Forsyth with the St. Lawrence River Valley Redevelopment Agency, known as the RVRDA.
We haven't met since the last one, but the deadline for the CDEIP grants is April 15th. I encourage everyone to, any projects, get them through the packet.
Thank you, Mr. Forsyth. Next up is Mrs. Haggard with a report from the St. Lawrence County Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of these things I mentioned last time, the upcoming trade shows that the chamber will be at, and people are welcome to partner and share the booth to share the love of the county and meet prospective visitors. Call 315-386-4000 if you're interested. I also mentioned the Discover a Weekend Away at New York's northern border. The last time I reported, that is something that will benefit our businesses because there's a cost sharing on streaming TV campaign, and will feature properties and branding for the county. Upcoming additions to St. Lawrence County Trail System are a couple of barn wheel trail driving routes, which will be packaged into an experience pitched to small bus groups. Sounds fun. And the chamber will host the Visit St. Lawrence County Tourism Dinner on Wednesday, May 25th at Pickens Hall in Hubleton. The dinner will include a happy hour and presentations highlighting positive trends we are seeing in the industry. All community, elected, and tourism partners are welcome and encouraged to attend. RSVP to Regina at slcchamber.org. And the Love Local initiative was very successful. And a couple of things they're working on is business connections with the BOCES program, exploring a military spouse employment program with Fort Drum, resident recruitment efforts, and planning is underway for all the trade shows and open air markets that they've had in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Haggard. Next up, we have Mr. Burke with the Soil and Water Conservation District Board. Mr. Burke.
The soil and water staff are working on grants for climate resilient farming. They have 2 applicants as of now. They also are working with 1 applicant for the ag non-point source, which is water quality. The board approved, the Soil and Water Board approved the cost share program for cover crops. They're continuing to work on the slow ash mortality project. They have trap trees or traps planted around the trees on the border of infestations. And on the timber theft, the econ officer has indicated that we would have to, that Soil and Water would have to demonstrate ownership of that property that the timber was taken from to show that it belonged to the county. I'm not exactly sure, maybe Kevin knows more, but I'm not sure whether there's going to be a next step or not. It sounded like it was kind of prohibitive from the email that we received regarding the econ officer's assessment. And the last thing is that the board, Soil and Water Board, is still looking for a board member. The bylaws basically state that it has to be an active farmer or a Grange member. So they asked if we would put the word out there and maybe get somebody to apply. That's all I have, Kevin, unless you have something to add.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. I think there was 5 trees that were actually marked from a previous sale. So they actually were not taken during the previous sale. So they actually were paid for. And I believe the alleged individual that's responsible is in the clink someplace else, I think in another state, something of that matter. But it doesn't look like it's something that Soil and Water's going to invest a lot of time in it. Fortunately, they were marked for a previous sale and were paid for. Mr. Lightfoot?
Yeah, just to remind everybody that the committee that was chosen to meet with the City of Ogdensburg Planning Department will be meeting Thursday at 1 o'clock, and we'll be using the conference room in the same location as is our CPS unit over there. They have a rather large conference room there that is available. So.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Next up is old and new business. Who has any old business? Mr. Denisha.
Yeah, in regards to, we've had quite a lot of discussion in regards to the jail, the old jail building, third house. And as you know, we still have we're going to need room for additional attorneys. And we do have, it was brought to my attention by Mr. Lightfoot, that we do have, we've been authorized a $25,000 grant for space study. And, you know, it is money that we have to spend money, but money that's going to be returned to us. And it may not be, you know, it's free money. It may be an opportunity to look at the existing space and see if there's anything that can be done that would meet our needs.
Where's the grant from?
I'm going to refer to
Indigent Legal Services.
Yeah, ILS.
And what it is that particular $25,000 grant is earmarked for looking at alternate sites or additional sites for workspace. Also included in that grant is upwards of $150,000 to actually do renovations or repairs or remodeling for, I believe, probably if a structure were identified and was usable, it would pay for what was required to get it into shape to serve the, whomever it was that we were going to put there. It doesn't specify that at least from my reading, it doesn't specify what kind of office space, although the monies do come from the indigent services in Albany. So I would assume that they would be looking to put attorneys in there. But you still have to have, it looked at and make a decision as to, the structural integrity of the building, what could it be used for? I think that it would kill two birds with one stone. If we needed to put attorneys in there, it's paid for. If that isn't identified as a building suitable for attorneys, you still have had it looked at and would in all likelihood get some instruction as to or ideas as to what it was you could do with that building.
Bruce, isn't there an existing study now about the asbestos?
Yes, hazardous material study.
Okay.
So this is really an appropriate use type study. So that study was done a number of years ago that we've actually incorporated now into the hazardous material study for the RFP for public safety. Our hope is whoever bids on both, or whoever bids on that one, could do the remediation for both to move that forward.
Thank you. Anyone else have any old business? How about new business? Mrs. Haggard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In regard to the committee that is looking at the use of the ARPA money, I know they have come up with some suggestions and it will come before the board. I've been listening along to find out what your recommendations are going to be and what the requirements are. But I can tell you, in the past week, I have received countless emails, I have received snail mail, and I have received telephone calls from people who work for our county that are very interested in us taking a serious look at the use of some of the funds in a program similar to that is being done in Franklin County, as well as other counties in the state. I believe that it's important for us to consider what they're telling us and to investigate whether that is something that money could be used for. Now, I am not familiar with all the parameters, but I'm assuming that if other counties in the state are doing it, then it is a legitimate use of the money. Many of our employees are frontline workers, and they were here, and they came to work and did the work. They couldn't stop going into people's homes. They couldn't stop plowing our roads. They couldn't stop guarding the inmates at the prison during the pandemic. I was very moved by many of the letters that I received. Many were sort of all the same, but some of them got very in-depth about some of the stuff that our employees face. I've said this before, we have great people working for us, and I'd like them to come and work for us, the other great people who are out there, and the great people we have to stay with us. And I think this would be a great way to show them how much we appreciate it. And I'd like to ask the committee to take a look at that. Thank you.
Mr. Snuthers.
In regards to Legislator Hager's comments, I'd like some clarification. I'm a little confused. This email that we got as legislators last Tuesday from the National Association of Counties says that they're analyzing Treasury Department's final rule for the American Rescue Plan Act. And I don't know how many people read through this, if you click on read more, there's 60 pages, an overview of U.S. Treasury final rule for ARPA fiscal recovery fund. And on page 23, it talks about the salaries and use of money for salaries. And it says, and I quote, premium pay may be awarded to hourly, part-time, or salaried or non-hourly workers. And then it says in red, which I don't know why that's, and it must not supplant normal or overtime pay. So in recognition that other places have done that, I'm not sure if our county attorney would chime in on what that means, if that's something new or if that's a clarification. What does that mean?
Go ahead, Mr. Button, if you'd like to, your question.
As much as I'd like to be able to shoot an answer off the top of my head, I haven't completely finished the review of the final rule. I do have a synopsis of the final rule that I've had an opportunity to review, but if you'd like, I can try to get you an answer on that, Mr. Smithers.
What's your pleasure, Mr. Smithers?
I'll await our county attorney's comments on that. I'm a little confused right now as to whether that is legal or not.
Mr. Forsythe.
We're gonna gather information to review that, like Mrs. Haggard recommends. Let's get, all the counties to bid promos and lay people off. Let's get all the businesses in St. Lawrence County that are not here any longer as a result. And statewide, just see what the other parts of the state are. Because I think you gotta factor in all of this. And I'd also like to know what private sector employees were compensated outside of stimulus money.
I would like to add to that we get a report on how this fits in with Article 8, Section 1 of the New York State Constitution.
That would be something for Mr. Button to research.
That's correct.
Okay. Mr. Perkins.
Thank you. We have received many emails, way too many to answer. But I guess in no way do I mean any disrespect or any non-appreciation of all the hard work the county employees performed in their employment at the county during the pandemic. Many of us, including us in the private sector, worked through an extremely difficult time during the pandemic. While there were some that were not able to work due to the lockdowns, did not get paid for the time they missed through no fault of their own. But no, St. Lawrence County worked very hard to make sure all of our employees were paid throughout the pandemic. While some didn't work every week, some worked remotely, we made provisions to help accommodate our employees. We still made sure all our employees were held harmless at the taxpayer's dollar. I wish I could say the same for the 4,200 people in St. Lawrence County who lost their jobs. There are many smaller businesses who suffered financial hardships, while some had to permanently close due to the extreme difficulties of the lockdowns. For these reasons, I cannot support using the ARPA funds to give our dedicated employees. I would rather see the funds be used in a way that will benefit the residents of the county as a whole. I truly believe the committee is working on this and being very cognizant of how to best utilize the funds.
Anyone else?
Mr. Burke.
Mr. Burke.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Burke.
Well, to a certain extent, I agree with Dave and Rick, but also with Margaret. I mean, I think our employees have done a wonderful job. I'm more concerned about retention. Larry touched on it tonight. I think we're bleeding human resources, and that loss of employees, there's a cost for that. And I think if we did some kind of a program use some of the money for employee retention, it would be a cause well served. And I think as far as businesses and all the rest of the public, I mean, I think we should have, forego the county portion of sales tax on gasoline and diesel and heating fuel. There's no better way to help businesses and individuals than to give some relief in that form. It may not be a great relief, but it's something. And so my assessment would be, do I think we treated our employees fairly during COVID? Absolutely. I agree with Rick's assessment of that. But we're still bleeding employees. We're still losing our human resources. And I would be strongly in favor of using some of that ARPA money as a retention strategy, as well as providing relief to the taxpayers.
Anybody else? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Dedisha.
You know, I agree with Rick, I agree with Dave. I don't think any of our employees were treated unfairly. You know, no one lost their job as a result of the pandemic. There are a lot of folks that obviously that didn't work full weeks. No one lost any money as a result of the pandemic. And one of the things that I plan on doing, I'm going to talk with all the towns within my district, just to get some feedback from them, as well as to, you know, what you think. But I agree with John, retention, and I don't know if it fits here or not, but rather than, you know, if we have people that are leaving the county, highway employees, MEOs, they're leaving the county to go to work for towns and villages. They're making more money. In some cases, $5 to $6 an hour more for a town or village than the county's paying. And you know, it doesn't take long at $5 an hour to make up this. I think the figure was thrown out was $3,000 a person. You know, and that's not good. I think we need to look at retention. How are we going to keep our people? We've lost a couple professional people from the highway department. We can't hire nurses. Because we don't offer enough money. So I don't think the answer is giving $3,000 away to each employee. You know, nobody lost anything. They worked hard, and I appreciate it. I fully understand the position of the union. I also value deeply the contributions that every employee of St. Lawrence County at every level gave during this thing. But I think it goes much deeper than giving $3,000 away. I think where we would be better served is to look at retention of existing employees.
Mrs. Hager.
I just want to point out that we talk about taxpayers' money. Our employees, for the most part, live in our county. They are taxpayers. Additionally, I would hope maybe some people are going to take the money if it were to be allocated and go to Florida, but a lot of that money will be spent in this county, and we all benefit from that. So I think sometimes we forget that our employees live here, they pay taxes here, they buy things here, and that makes a difference. It does. It's not as if that money is just coming out of nowhere and going to somebody who doesn't put something in for that money.
Mr. Forsyth.
On the flip side of what Larry just said, yeah, I'm sure we do. We lose certain individuals and certain type of personnel to towns that pay more. But as a business owner, it's very hard, and Harry probably attests to this, to hire a bookkeeper secretarial, match the salary benefit package that the county does, that the private individual has to pay. You can't do it. You just, in St. Lawrence County, it's just next to impossible. Okay, so that's one example. The nurses, we look at these nurses, we're $20 an hour off paying a prevailing wage for a nurse. But maybe we gotta look at the whole picture, not just one segment or the other, but, there's a huge disparity in certain aspects of it that, it should be fair for all, so. And I don't know the answer, but there's two sides on that.
Ms. Gergen.
Actually, Mr. Arquette was first.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Arquette.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the onset of this planning process, it seemed to me that the criteria won't allow for cash payments to employees, and obviously that's not the case. And with that in mind, and it's certainly not through intimidation from the dozens and dozens of letters, it's in part because of things John said, and Margaret was spot on as well. I think there's some economic impact gains here in the county that could be made of it. So I'm not suggesting that we just, say $3,000 an employee or whatever, but I think it's worthy of conversation, and maybe we can meet somewhere in the middle that would satisfy everybody. But I think it's worth a further conversation, outside of this format. Thanks.
Yeah. Ms. Curran.
So mine is kind of new / old business, but a different subject. So we met the other day with EMS again, and we talked about some of the reasons why we're missing someplace between 10 and 15 or 10 and 12% of the calls each month when people call for 911. Some of it is people have just plain left the building. I know a few people from our local fire department that during the pandemic allowed their EMT and paramedic licenses to sunset because it was just too much to go for the training, cost too much. And then we talked about how some of the greatest saves we have are with something as simple as an AED and just basic life support, basic CPR. So I'd like to see some of these funds at least be looked at for something that would support EMS, fire training. 10 to 12% is a lot of calls. It's a lot of people's lives that are affected. And I'm just wondering if we could use some of that money to make sure that we have good AED availability in towns and villages, especially during the summer months when we have so many people that congregate, on the water's edge and stuff. It would be nice to have some of that stuff. It would also be nice to see if there wouldn't be some way that we could encourage more people to serve in their communities. And one of the things they had talked about was there's a way to buy into the state retirement system for some of the fire and EMS. There's plans that I'm gathering more information on, people might want to look at. But I think that EMS and fire serve all 108,000 plus people that live here in this county, plus all of our visitors. And it's something that might be worthy of just looking at as a group. Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Smithers.
I read part of an email, I think, from you that said possible use would be to deal with the emerald ash borer problem, which is something that we have brought up previously, but I'd like to get, if possible, some kind of estimate on the cost of this. It could be a significant cost to the county, and it's gonna hit us one of these days, the need for this. It's inevitable. And so I'd like to throw that out there. The anticipated cost of how many trees is the county going to be responsible for? On these ARPA funds, I think we're talking about county employees, 839. I have a bunch of questions about our decisions. And these people all could probably ask these, but I think we all need to ask ourselves these. Were the parties affected financially? Did the public whom we serve benefit generally? How do we prioritize the various requests? And we do have a lot of requests. What are the short-term and long-term effects? We have a backlog of court cases that are aggravated by COVID? And do we have financial needs to adapt operations? And we've been looking at those that were inspired by COVID and are going to be continuing. We're going to have expenses in those areas.
So, Mr. Button.
I hope you can hear me. Mr. Smithers, I have obtained an answer to the question that you posed. If you'd like me to announce that answer right now, or if you'd like to wait to discuss it afterwards, I'd be more than happy to, and I do have an answer.
Go ahead, Steve.
Okay.
Thank you. The Treasury actually issued a synopsis of acceptable uses of ARPA funding with respect to public sector employment. Specifically, they identified 3 primary criteria. The first, providing additional funding, pay reductions for those individuals who were previously reduced during the course of COVID or were furloughed since the onset of the pandemic, up to the difference in the employee's pay, taking into account unemployment benefits they may have received during the course of the pandemic. Number 2, maintaining current compensation levels to prevent layoffs. ARPA funds may be used to maintain current compensation levels with adjustments for inflation in order to prevent layoffs that would otherwise be necessary. Number 3, providing worker retention incentives, including reasonable increases in compensation to persuade employees to remain with the employer as compared to other employment options. Retention incentives must be entirely additive to an employee's regular compensation, narrowly tailored to need, and should not exceed incentives traditionally offered by the recipient or compensation that alternative employers may offer to compete for the employees. The United States Treasury presumes that retention incentives that are less than 25% of the rate of base pay for an individual employee, or 10% for a group or category of employees, are reasonably proportional to the need to retain employees as long as the other requirements are met. Those are the 3 primary subunits of public sector employment benefit that ARPA funds can be utilized for.
Okay. Anyone else? So a lot of topics have been discussed. I've done some math. First of all, I want to address Mr. Burke's proposal to eliminate taxes on heating fuel and also sales tax on gas. Last year in 2021, we collected $5.1 million in sales tax on gas and diesel used for transportation, and $4.3 million for the heating sales tax. So that's about, 9.4, and with the price of gas now actually 50 cents, 75 cents to $1 higher, my expectation is that we'll be somewhere around 10 and 11 million. To take away that sales tax revenue for this county, would have to be compensated by a 25% tax bill on your property. We have shifted the burden of anybody who's actually that owns property in here. The burden of replacing that sales tax revenue would be a 25% increase in your property taxes. So the other thing is, if you divide the amount of money that we spend for personnel, you will find that the average St. Lawrence County employee is making about $55,000 as for earnings. And the benefit package is about 58% of that. So at $55,000 and then another $30,000 in benefits, your average employee here that we employ of the 839, and we as legislators are included, would be about $85,000. And if you look at the mean household income here in St. Lawrence County, you look on the census, which is on your county website, the mean household average is $49,000, with the median being $63,000. So it's not a problem that our employees are not competitively compensated. They are. They're on the upper end of it. So you mentioned, Mr. Denisha, that you had sent out an email to all of us that 4,200 jobs have been lost. If you just go down Main Street, you will find 2 restaurants who are not actually serving inside. That is takeout. There's estimate that anywhere between 40 and 60% of the small businesses across this nation are out of business. They closed their doors. You mentioned how with the professionals that we can't compete. We lost a professional out of our county because we lost him to the state. And it was a no-brainer, same job, didn't have to move for an additional compensation of $18,000 plus benefits. So I think if you look at Franklin County did what we didn't do. Franklin County furloughed some of their staff. So I don't understand the other things that they did. Franklin County also cut funding for cooperative extension in their county, which is, to me, is ridiculous when the county is primary agriculture, spends a lot of their resources on property tax and the services or the products that are generated within the county of Franklin. So those are the main issues. So if you look outside, here, we are sensitive to our employees. We deal with this every Monday and all through the week. Look outside your broader horizon, the people that you represent. Look at the roads that you're driving on. When this first $21 million approximately came to us, I thought, great, we can use all this money and build our roads up and our bridges. And that is something that the whole county can benefit because everybody drives on them. Everybody gets services that come to their house, whether it's your mail, whatever, your fuel, going to get your groceries, going to get your job. And unfortunately, that is not part of the process. Although the rule changes April 1st, we did a calculation, or actually the county treasurer, Renee Cole, did the calculation for the COVID losses for St. Lawrence County and the amount of about $3 million. April 1st, the rule becomes that we would be able to utilize up to $10 million in that calculation without having to explain the calculation for it. And it specifically mentions in that April 1st rule that this money could be used for culverts and other infrastructure. The committee, which is made up of Dan Fay, Jim Reagan, and Tony Arquette, and myself as chair, we have tentatively, not set in stone, it's to your approval, about $18 million out of that 21 million. Is it actually 21? Is it 20.9?
20.9.
Okay, it's $20.9 million. When we started this and when Mr. Sheridan appointed me as chair, I wanted to avoid a pork fest where individual legislators would be coming with what their constituents or their townships that they represented for their little projects or whatever else. So I asked Ruth to come up with categories which would benefit everyone in St. Lawrence County, whether it was our actually county operations, which are servicing the people, all of us that we represent, and things of that nature. And so tentatively, we have about 18 million, about 6 million of that is split in between infrastructure and the internet usage. And we don't know if that 6 million is going to be necessary in that department because of the infrastructure bill that did pass. But none of those monies, to my knowledge, have been allocated.
No. Or
so it's kind of in talking with the IDA, it's kind of a crapshoot. So that's where we are. Just Mr. Smithers, to answer your question about the ash borer, we've tentatively set aside $1 billion. And it would be removing ash trees along county highways where the hydro, the National Grid or whatever, does not have a power line. And so improve the safety of our roads. But nothing's stuck in stone. And so if we granted the request of the various employees that sent in requests for additional money, that amount of money at $3,000 a person plus the $250 that you got in your shop, which is like 67 or 70% of our employees have gotten the vaccination, would amount to $2,670,000 approximately. This is a significant chunk of cash that would be designated to 839 people within the county. And I don't think that's fair. This is federal money that our grandchildren's children are probably gonna end up paying back. And I think that the benefit of this, this federal largesse, should be spread out throughout the county. It's hard to pick. I mean, I gave the example to the committee, I think I spoke to them. If there was 8 votes to support, you could give $10,000 apiece to any subset of employees that you wanted, whether they were fire workers or they were insurance agents or anything. So the rules are broad. So it's gonna come to the wisdom of this board and consensus of actually how we spend this money. I would like to spend any additional funds we got towards our failing infrastructure. We're 40% deficient. I think that was before this winter, which is potholes everywhere. The $836,000 that you got your letter from Mr. Chambers for that money, that pothole money, is now going to be going to New York City. The ARPA funds could be used to replace that. So this is Henry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do you have any idea about, or do we have any numbers on the infrastructure bill and how we're going to benefit from that? Because I'm sure we will.
I have none, not from the federal. I don't even know what the numbers are from New York. I'm sure Senator Schumer took pretty good care of New York, but to the demise of somebody else. As a matter of fact, in the last bill, they tried to take ARPA money away from states that hadn't utilized it, and New York and 4 or 5 other states were the ones that were going to benefit from it. And that was actually Democrats within the Senate actually stopped that.
And additionally, I think I would like to ask Mrs. Doyle. I know at NISAC you saw other counties other than Franklin County talking about this program.
Yeah.
Can you do just a quick survey and see what else is out there?
Yes, and my intent is to get copies of any of their premium pay discussions or similar to what you've received, to get those to share with the board as well.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so it's good discussion. I'd like to move on to executive session.
Hold on, Kevin. Hold on. I had my
Didn't see
hand.
it. I'm sorry, John. That's why there's advantage of being here. Go ahead, Mr. Berg.
Just so you don't get the last word, Kevin, which I know you like to get, but the 25% tax increase, that was never part of a discussion. I don't think there's a one of us on the board that are looking to have any increase in property taxes. Not one, myself included. We're talking about the ARPA funds. And that 10 to 11 million that you quoted, that you came up with, that's simply returning money to our taxpayers, directly to our taxpayers. It's their money. So the idea that you would portray it as a potential 25% tax increase is ridiculous. We're talking about ARPA money. You got $21 million. We have $21 million collectively, the taxpayers. Who should get it? No better cause in my mind than the taxpayers.
Are you finished, Mr. Berg?
I am, as long as you don't have the last word again.
I'm going to have the last word. All I did was the math. You've got right down, which is consistent. $5.1 million last year in gas and diesel for transportation, 4.3 for heating fuel. Those are actual numbers. Just take that number, take the 9.4 and figure out and divide that by 440,000. You will figure out the tax increase. If you are of the mindset that you think that revenue is going to remain constant from year to year, like you tell your constituents, we're going to give you a tax break this year, but not next year and not the year following. It'd be inconsistent because that would be the expectation. So we're going to move on.
You misunderstand, Kevin. You misunderstand.
Is there a need for executive session?
Yes, sir.
There isn't you can't close arbitrarily.
And what what qualifications do we have for executive session that you'd like to go into?
Negotiations, litigation, personnel for the medical, financial, credit, or employment history of a particular person or corporation, or matters leading to the appointment, employment, promotion, demotion, discipline, suspension, dismissal, or removal of a particular person or corporation, and there is one appointment.
Is there a
Point of
motion
order.
for session?
Point
Go
of
ahead,
order.
Mr. Burke. Yep, go ahead.
Steve, can the chair
What
arbitrarily?
is your point of order, Mr. Burke?
I'm asking Steve if you can arbitrarily close the conversation on your own. The discussion was about.
Go ahead, Mr. Button.
I would probably have to research the issue. However, Mr. Akers is the chair of the Finance Committee. As chair of the Finance Committee, it's his responsibility to continue to keep the meeting moving. That being said, when there is an open floor debate on a specific topic, unless there is a move to limit that debate on that specific topic, it would theoretically continue until such time as the members either closed it themselves or a new issue was raised. So the difference, at least with the old and new business as it comes up, is it's not technically an action point. No motion has been brought to the floor. So it's not as simple as it requires some type of action from another one of the members to terminate the debate on the subject. So that's what I can tell you generally speaking, but I'd be more than happy to research the issue for you if you'd like me to, Mr. Burke.
Okay. Is there a motion to go into executive session? Mr. Perkins, second by Ms. Curran. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? One opposition, two oppositions.